Yeah. How's everybody doing tonight? Well, my name is Jen Dool. I'm the Interim Manager of Outreach and Engagement here at Richmond Public Library, and I would like to formally welcome you to this exciting event. When I learned that our library would be hosting Ms. Johnson for the launch of her new book, The House of Eve, I was thrilled. Probably like many of you, I read Yellow Wife when it first came out and was absolutely captivated. And the fact that it's set right here in our own backyard makes it that much more impactful. Then I had the opportunity to see Ms. Johnson speak about Yellow Wife at the Junior League of Richmond's annual Book and Author event, and she made her work just come alive. And although I've not had the opportunity to read her newest book, as it just came out today, my friends over at Fountain Books were lucky enough to get advanced reader copies, and they've just gushed over it. So I'm very excited. And they're not the only ones. The Washington Post calls The House of Eve a triumph of historical fiction. Library Journal says it's a moving work of women's fiction with timely perspective on racism, colorism, and pre-Roe women's rights. Timely is right. Author Robert Jones Jr. may have put it best when he said, Sadeqa Johnson is expert at excavating the parts of the past that we would rather not confront. She dusts off these harrowing histories, shines them up, and gives them their proper glory. She mines this terrain with soaring grace, shining intellect, and a love that resonates on every page. And on top of that, just today, The House of Eve was named as the February Book Club pick for Reese's Book Club. Super excited. I know you all are as excited as I am, so without further ado, please welcome international best-selling and award-winning author, Sadeqa Johnson. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness, you guys, look at all these people. I am so appreciative. You know, when you do this, you're like, is anybody gonna come? It's just gonna be me. So this is wonderful, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful. So thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? The mic is good? Okay. Have you ever felt like there was a calling on your life? You need glasses, but it's hard to see you guys. Let's start over, okay? I like to be able to see you. I want to see my paper, but I want to see you more. So let's see how this goes. Take two. Have you ever felt like there was a calling on your life? A calling that was bigger and more powerful than anything that you could dream up. A whisper in your ear or a nudge pushing you out of your comfort zone, even when you were afraid. Well, that's what writing a novel feels like to me. I believe that the greatest stories float through the universe, begging to be born. Characters choose their conduits by ruffling a writer's imagination, stroking her curiosity. Characters visit me in my daydreams, eventually becoming my friends. Once I say yes, yes to the journey, yes to telling their stories, we have a contract. These characters unravel their wants and desires to me, and my job is to trail along and capture their stories down on the paper. Yet after Yellow Wife was published, you guys know Yellow Wife? Yeah. Well, after Yellow Wife was published, I knew that it was the best that I had to offer. The thought that constantly haunted me was, how do you better your best? I waited a long time to hear from the universal well of stories, from new characters scratching and pleading and begging to be born. I was terrified by their silence. I wondered for months if I had another historical novel in me, or was I just a one-hit historical novel wonder? Desperate for a distraction, I decided to take a different approach and set out to write a young adult novel featuring 4 teenagers set in a Philadelphia high school. I'm from Philadelphia. Go Eagles! Well, are you guys familiar with the young adult writer Jason Reynolds? Well, he has written a ton of books, and one of his most popular books is called Ghost, and it's from the Track series. And I remember reading Ghost with my young daughter when she was in middle school. We loved it. We ate the books up, and I thought, well, maybe I'll write something like him, because it's always easier to emulate someone else than to be yourself. I had it all planned out. I would turn my YA book into a series. My daughters have always asked me to write something that was just for them, and so this was my big chance. I would write it in their honor, which would give me a little leverage when I asked them to do something like clean the kitchen. And when they shot back at me, "But Mom," I would be able to say, "Girl, I wrote you a whole book series. I gave you bragging rights for all of your friends. And you can't do this one little thing for me?" Parents, you know what I'm talking about, right? It was a genius idea. This YA series was a win-win in all directions. So all I had to do now was become Jason Reynolds. Now he is slightly handsome, right? A little bit more handsome than me. So that was a tall order. But I set off into my writing cave in the mountains, someplace where I could focus. And from the sketches of this young adult series, Ruby was the one character that I could see and feel vividly. She was 15. She was smart. She had a body that was shaped like a Coca-Cola bottle. She was so beautiful that grown men catcalled her on the street. And she had a mother who wished she had never been born. The idea of being unwanted by one's mother was not foreign to me. My late grandmother told me that she was the black sheep of her family. She had gotten pregnant with my mother when she was 14, and she had her at 15. And she hid the pregnancy from everyone, even the daughter who she had. It was the early 1950s, and having a baby out of wedlock was the ultimate sin. My mother told me that she didn't know that her mother was her mother until she was in the 3rd grade. She had been raised by her grandmother, and it had never been openly discussed. And as I was growing up, I could always feel this underlying tension between them. I knew that they loved each other, but there was this other thing that was going on that I just couldn't put my finger on. My mother does not think that there was love between her parents. She described it as a one-time hookup. My grandfather, Gene, did not make my grandmother an honest woman by marrying her. Well, he couldn't. His family was very light-skinned and from the right sides of the track. My grandmother, Yvonne, was mahogany brown and from the lower class section of North Philadelphia. Like oil and water, in the Black community, they were not intended to mix. My grandfather married someone else, leaving my grandmother and mother alone and stuck with the burden of the shame and embarrassment. All of this got me wondering about the other women of my grandmother's era who found themselves accidentally pregnant. What were the options for these women during the 1940s and 50s? Searching for the answer to this question, I went to my favorite place in the world, the library. As I researched the idea of a culture of secrecy and what it did to women, I stumbled upon maternity homes. They were homes for unwed pregnant women often run by nuns and meant to be a refuge, a place to hide from the social pressure and the stigma of having a baby out of wedlock. A place where the mother could give up her baby and return to her life like it never happened. But as I continued to research, I found that these homes were so much more. The astonishing fact is that between 1945 and 1973, 1.5 million women in the United States lost children to forced adoption and maternity homes. I say lost because, as I mentioned, they were forced to give up their babies. They were coerced, they were tricked, they were mind controlled. Until 1973, abortion was illegal and punishable by imprisonment for the mother and the doctor. So unmarried women were pressed to give up these babies because there was no IVF treatments. And the only way for married couples who suffered from infertility to have a baby was through adoption. The idea for the House of Eve started with a what if. What if my grandmother had money and opportunity, and when she found herself pregnant and in trouble, she was sent away to a home for unwed mothers? This would erase the humiliation of bearing a child out of wedlock, and she could return to her life in North Philadelphia like it never happened and start over. Searching for the answers to this question, I read The Girls Who Went Away, the hidden history of women who surrendered children for adoption in the decades before Roe v. Wade by Ann Fessler. In the book, Fessler brilliantly brings to life the voices of more than 100 women who entered these maternity homes, detailing their trials and tribulations and endeavors. But in her recounting, I could not locate a single Black woman. When I asked around, I was told that Black women went down south to hide out and then left the babies with a relative, or they had the baby and dealt with the consequences because there were no other options. Trying to connect the dots between my research and my grandmother's story made me curious. I knew the Black experience had never been just one narrative, no matter what you see on reality television. Sidebar, I never throw drinks on my girlfriends. Not one of them has ever pulled my hair out. So it was up to me to put the pieces together and tell this whole story the right way. As a historical fiction writer, I feel charged to uncover stories that have been forgotten, hidden, or untold. It is my calling to shine a light in the spaces of our history that has been unmined. So I knew there had to be a small group of elite Black people, doctors and lawyers, judges and business owners, who could not conceive a baby and wanted a family, just as white families in wealthy circles wanted a child. Thus, the silent drought was over, and in walked the character who would bring it all together. From its conception, I thought the story was Ruby's alone. Then one day, I was sitting in my office, staring out the window as I often do when I'm waiting for the muse to visit me, and I felt this presence. It was overwhelming. and her name was Eleanor. She came to me full of rage, and I could sense a desperation radiating off of her skin. She said to me, "I need help. I want a baby." She made the hairs on my arms stand up, and I got that feeling I get when spirit is communicating with me, saying, "Pay attention before you miss it." So I started writing down everything that she said. And that's the way writing works. I usually take the weekends off from writing so that I could give my brain a little break, give myself some time to breathe. And that Saturday, I sat down to watch Toni Morrison's documentary, The Pieces I Am. Has anybody seen that? Yes, if not, you should put it on your list. It's amazing. And in the documentary, Toni says that she didn't know that Black folks separated themselves by color until she stepped foot on Howard University's campus in 1949. Growing up in Ohio, she lived with Germans and Italians and Poles, and that Black people were too busy trying to get along with everybody. They didn't have time to pit themselves against each other. And just like that, a light bulb went off in my head. Howard, a private historical Black university, was founded in 1867. And to this date, it has graduated the largest number of African-American doctors than any other university in the whole United States. Howard has been referred to as the Black Ivy League. And I quickly realized that it was the perfect setting to meet the upper echelon Black and wealthy community. So to write a book, I need my characters, I need a time period, I need a plot, and I just found my setting. So within this setting, I could explore the story of infertility and adoption and how it played out in the late 1940s and early 1950s in the lives of the upper class Black America. In order to find the story, I needed to access the lives of these wealthy Black families. And so I headed back to my favorite place in the world, the library. And I picked up a copy of Our Kind of People, Inside America's Black Upper Class by Lawrence Otis Graham. The book Our Kind of People pulled back the veil on the wealthiest Black families in America in all of the major cities around the country. It was an important study of privileged African Americans who could trace their roots back 2 and 3 generations of education and financial success. But they were also a highly selective group, and they did not just allow anybody into their fold. I started thinking, what would a woman like Eleanor, a small town girl from the Midwest, do if she found herself involved with the son of the wealthiest family in DC, a world in which she could not understand or did not belong to? Couple that with reproductive issues, what would her desperation to fit into this new world cause her to do in the name of love? Now that's drama. And with that, the House of Eve was born. Along my 1.5-year journey in writing The House of Eve, I discovered and folded into the novel a few real-life heroes. In the middle of the story, you will meet Georgia May. She's a mute young woman, and what I know about her is that her name was Georgia May Rowe, and in 1959, she gave birth at the age of 14 to her second child at St. Gerard's Maternity Home, right here in Richmond, Virginia. She had become pregnant by a 27-year-old white man who was married with children. To hide his shame, she was dropped off at a maternity home. Georgia May had requested that her son be given to her aunt, but because her son was born very fair-skinned and her aunt was very dark-skinned, the request was denied. Through Ruby's eyes, you will meet her fabulous Aunt Marie. Aunt Marie is a big-boned, gun-toting, cross-dressing lounge singer who runs numbers out of the back of a club called Kiki's. Aunt Marie's character was inspired by Gladys Bentley, a Philadelphia native, blues pianist, and jazz singer who performed in the most notorious gay speakeasies in Harlem, as well as the famous Cotton Club. Bentley dressed in men's clothing. She wore red lipstick and big chandelier earrings, and she was known for her loud and raunchy lyrics. Langston Hughes praised Bentley as an amazing exhibition of musical energy, a large, dark, masculine lady whose feet pounded the floor while her fingers pounded the keyboard. In Eleanor's world, you'll meet Dorothy Porter. She's Eleanor's boss at the library. I told you, library is my favorite place. So anytime I get to honor a librarian, I jump at the chance. Dorothy Porter was one of the unexpected finds that I stumbled upon in my research. Over a career that spanned over 40 years, Dorothy Porter Wesley built the Moreland Spingarn Research Center at Howard University, which is recognized as one of the world's largest and most comprehensive collection for studying Black history and culture. When Porter realized that the Dewey Decimal System had only two numbers, one for slavery and one for colonization, she created her own system that created space and told the real story for African American productivity. One of the things that I found so compelling about Dorothy Porter was that she was often referred to as the shopping bag lady, because she would search dusty attics and rummage through smelly basements and old forgotten closets for material that the untrained eye viewed as trash. But to Dorothy Porter, these were treasures of books and pamphlets and diaries and photographs that could be added to what she referred to as her collection at the library. So what is the House of Eve about? Well, in 1950 Philadelphia, you meet 15-year-old Ruby Pearsall. She is on track of becoming the first in her family to attend college, in spite of having a mother more interested in keeping a man than raising her daughter. But a taboo love affair with a white Jewish boy threatens to pull her back down into the poverty and desperation that has been passed on to her like a birthright. Eleanor Quarles arrives in Washington, D.C., with ambition and secrets. When she meets the handsome William Pride at Howard University, they fall madly in love. But William hails from one of DC's elite wealthy Black families, and his parents don't just let anyone into their fold. Eleanor hopes a baby will make her finally feel at home in his world and grant her the life that she's been searching for. But having a baby and fitting in is easier said than done. The House of Eve is an epic love story that explores the difficult decisions women of all races have made throughout history regarding love, sex, and their fundamental rights. This is a novel that is timely. And I never set out to write a book that's timely, but somehow the universe just wraps itself around whatever I've got going on. It's about ambitious women who refuse to give up on their dreams. My hope is that this book will open your heart and your mind and give you a glimpse of a life that you have never considered, and that it will enlighten you to pass this gift on to another reader, because it is up to us to share our history. And I'll leave you with this. For my writers, my artists, my entrepreneurs, and my friends who feel that what has been put on your heart to pursue in life is too big, it's too hard, and it's too impossible. I stand before you as the girl who had a dream of being a published author. When I applied to grad school in pursuit of my MFA in creative writing, I was rejected from both NYU and the New School. And I remember when I got my rejection letter and I called my dad up, boo-hooing, crying my eyes out. Daddy, they don't want me, I got rejected. And my dad said, so what does that mean? I mean, you're not a writer anymore? You're gonna let somebody else define who you are? And then he hung up on me. And he said, call me back when you get yourself together. So I went on and I wrote my first novel, Love in a Carry-On Bag. And when I put that novel out into the world seeking representation, in order to get a book published, you need an agent. And I was rejected by nearly 20 literary agents. When I finally secured an agent who would take a chance on me, she took my first novel, Love in a Carry-On Bag, to the marketplace, and she shared it with 10 editors in the business. And one by one, the first 9 editors rejected that book. And we got down to the last editor, and she called me. It was a Friday night. I had 3 little kids, and we were standing in the kitchen. It was pizza night. And she said, Sadeqa, I have one editor, Touchstone Books, that's interested in Love in a Carry-On Bag. She's going to talk it over with her boss, and we should have an offer by Monday. So all weekend, I'm praying, I'm jumping around. I'm like, God, please, just this one person, please let her say yes. And then my agent called me back on Monday, and she said, I'm so sorry. She said that she can't buy your book, and maybe we should take a break and wait 6 months and we'll go out again. And I was distraught. I wanted to quit. And I remember walking through my neighborhood with my little kids in my double stroller. And I went down to the lake and I stood there and I cried for a vision. And I thought, what is it that I'm supposed to do? I've worked in publishing. I tried to go to grad school. I've tried everything. What is left? And my husband took me out to dinner to cheer me up. And over a couple of drinks, he said, what is it that you need to get this book off the ground? And I said, well, I need an editor. And he said, well, why don't we just hire an editor? And it was like the universe just opened up, and it was waiting for me to say yes, because self-publishing was never my journey or my dream. I had worked with J.K. Rowling and Bishop T.D. Jakes and Amy Tan and Nevada Barr and Catherine Coulter. I knew what it was like on the inside of the publishing house, and I wanted in. So self-publishing was not what I wanted, but it was the journey that I needed to take. And so when I said yes to it, everything that I needed started to fall into place for me. I got a distribution deal. I became the sales manager. So I would call up various independent booksellers and I would pretend like I was somebody else. I would give them a fake name. My maiden name is Murray and my family calls me Dee. So I would go, hey, this is Dee Murray, calling from 12th Street Press. I got this great book and I want to send you a couple copies. Would you premiere it in your store? And that is what we did. I literally packed up my kids and packed up my car and we went up and down the East Coast, and we sold Love in a Carry-On Bag at every single outside book festival that we could find. Oftentimes, I was standing on cobblestone streets until my feet hurt. It was always 90 degrees because that's when the outside book festivals happen. And so despite my best effort, I was sweating my makeup off and had rings underneath my armpits, but I was out there selling my book. And finally, my editor decided that she would be an agent, and I asked her to represent me. And we were working on my second novel, Second House from the Corner. And we took that book to maybe 6 or 7 different publishers. And again, I had to wait over a weekend. And that Monday, she called me and she said, Sadeqa, I have 3 editors from 3 major publishing houses that want to purchase your book. Why don't we take a look at these offers and see who we want to have a partnership with? So now, over a decade later, I stand before you with my 5th novel, The House of Eve, which was selected as an indie bookstore next pick and has been selected by the public library staff across the nation as February's Library Reads book. It is also an Apple book pick selection for February. Apple, like your phone, like your computer. And at 11 a.m. today, it was announced that The House of Eve is the Reese Witherspoon Reese Book Club pick for February. One of the premier celebrity book clubs in the entire world. I am a girl who believes in vision boards, and I have had a vision board for as long as I can remember. I started off with boards that I would cut pictures out of magazines. And every year I would put on my vision board, publishing deal, awards, Oprah's pick, right? Oprah's pick now is any celebrity book pick because there's so many to pick from. Every year I would put foreign rights, I would put New York Times bestseller. And to see some of these things come to fruition is overwhelming. I want you to know that none of this has happened overnight. It took hard work. It took vision. It took discipline. My husband often says, you are the most disciplined girl I know. Because even when I had small children, I would show up for my writing. When they were little, I had a babysitter who would come every day from 4 to 6. And I would sit them on the floor in the living room with their toys. And I would go into my basement in Hillside, New Jersey, and I would work on my book. It took an unwavering belief that God's plan for me was bigger than the one that I had for myself. It took prayer and meditation and constantly asking, what is my purpose? It took patience as I was slowly guided toward the tools and the people and the community and the opportunities that I needed to carry out my dream. Even in my darkest hour, I knew that it was my birthright to live in my power. I stand before you on the shoulders of my beloved grandmothers, whose stories I get to tell. I am my ancestors' wildest dream. And I appreciate each and every one of you for being on this journey with me as I amplify our voices and keep our stories alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you guys are the sweetest. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So we are going to do about 15 minutes of questions and answers. I have a microphone. I will do my best to get to as many people as possible. So raise your hand, claim the mic. If you have a question. You're speechless.
I see one in the back with the red shirt. Please stand. Hi.
I'm very excited to read your new book. Yellow Wife was outstanding. Thank you. What are your favorite books, and what has influenced your writing in the books that you've read?
You know, asking me what my favorite books is almost like asking me which one of my children are my favorite. And what I always tell my kids is that it's whichever one I'm with. But what I can say was that when I was younger, books that inspired me, you know, I was the girl who went to the library every Monday in the summer, and I would check out 7 books, and I would read a book a day. And I read so much that when school started back up, I started to sneak my books in school, and I would slip them behind my textbooks. Anybody do that? Slip my novels behind my textbooks, and then I didn't learn anything in math in 7th grade because I was so busy reading. But some of the books that inspired me early on was when I discovered Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I remember reading her entire biography, and my girlfriend, this is when I was in high school, would get mad that I wanted to spend my lunch period reading books instead of jumping double dutch, so she would hide my books from me. Terry McMillan was also another author who really inspired me. When I read the book Mama, that was the first time that I read a book about a Black girl and I could see myself in the story and really identify with her pain and her triumphs. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. When I was pregnant with my first child, I had a son, but his name was either going to be Miles or Zora after Zora Neale Hurston. So my second child was a girl, so she got the name Zora, but it was because I loved Zora Neale Hurston. And right now, I just finished reading Rivers Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer, which was beautiful. And listening to, I do both, I listen and I read. My last audiobook was The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum, which they were both really good. Yes. Question in the back. Hello.
Hi, it's not a question, it's just oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's not a question, but I just want to tell you that I am so pleased to meet you. Our book club chose Yellow Wife as our read, and I hope we're online. I hope that we can discuss it with you, but I just want to say it's my pleasure to meet the person who just read.
Thank you.
Coming. Hold on 1 second.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. My question is, how do you live with your characters when you finally finished your book? And one reason I ask that is because read The Yellow Life. My book club also read it. It was awesome. And Lumpkin's Jail is just half a mile away. So do you still have a continuing bond with your characters after you finish a book?
The question is, how do I live with my characters and what happens when I finish the book? So as I'm writing the book, the characters are always with me. They're always sort of kind of at the back of my mind working things out. I go through life with them. And as a matter of fact, when I finished Yellow Wife, I remember going I went to the Virginia Fine Arts Museum to see the exhibit, The Dirty South. And as I was walking through that exhibit, I think there was an old piano because they had a lot of music in this exhibit. And we got to the old piano and I thought, oh, what would Phoebe? Oh, Phoebe's not with me because Phoebe plays piano in Yellow White. And it was a sad moment because it was like, wow, we're not together anymore. We don't need each other anymore. We spent the time we needed to spend and now she's off on her own, you know, doing her own thing. And so I do have to let my characters go at some point. And also because I have to make room for new characters. So as I was working on the House of Eve, I didn't really think about anyone from Yellow Wife. And now that the House of Eve is finished, I'm talking about them. But when I sit down to work on my new novel, they're not sort of the committee in my head anymore.
I just wanted to ask you, did you do a lot of writing classes or to help your studio writing or anything like that? Because I think that, like, as we get older, we have a lot of stories like your grandmother and mine lived a long time and my mom lived a long time. And how do you formulate that? How did you start?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. How did I start? So I was a theater major. When I was in high school, I decided that I was going to be an actress. I was going to be on Broadway. I can't sing, but I was going to be on Broadway. So I went to college in New York City as a theater major. And it was there that I started I started writing plays because that was part of the curriculum. But living in New York City, the poetry scene was hot and vibrant. So I used to dress up with my friends with head wraps or a beret, and we would go to cool places called the Nuyorican Cafe, and we would write poetry, and I would get on stage and I would be like, so I'm running from the man. And I would talk real cool like that. So that was the beginning of my writing career. I did work at Scholastic. My beginning and as my career, I was a publicist. So I started at Scholastic Books. And while I was there, I started taking my first writing class because being surrounded by books, I love writing, I love reading. I thought, oh, I should give this a try. So I did take like those, you know, I didn't get into grad school. I tried, but they just wouldn't take me. So I took regular writing classes for a while and sort of adapted teachers as my mentors. They never really said yes to being my mentors. It was usually in my head that they were my mentors, but that was sort of the beginning of how I started writing.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. This has been amazing. I'm curious about your second book because you said the first one you went out, it was mostly turned down by agents, it was turned down by the editors, and you self-published. And then your second one, you know, you said you had your new agent and that you had 3 different editors who were interested. So do you think it was something, was it the track record from the first one that you self-published? Was it something different about that second novel? Do you feel like you would improve as a writer? Or what do you think made that difference?
I think it was a combination of everything. So yes, every book you get a little better and you get a little faster. My first novel took over 10 years. And if I had known that when I started, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. But my second novel came a lot faster. My agent was an editor as well. So the first book I sort of pants, which means that I just wrote by the seat of my pants. And when I was working on the second novel, she pushed me to outline it and write a synopsis and sort of have a roadmap of where I was going. And that helped to make the book go a little faster. And I think the traction that I made as a self-published author, I had won the Phyllis Wheatley Award for Love in a Carry-On Bag. So I had a little bit more of a resume. Social media was kind of happening. And so I had a couple of people on Facebook and that sort of thing. So I think it was a combination of everything that made that second book viable.
All right, we got one question here and then time for one more.
Thanks so much for being here. I love your work. I'm so excited. We're super excited about House of D, but I'm curious, are you already outlining for another project or are you taking a break?
So what happens is when I'm ending a book, when I'm getting toward the end of the book, I start to see characters for another book, and that's just what happens. They can't come too quick because I'm not ready for them, or sometimes they'll give me a little glimpse and I'm like, okay, hold on, let me jot this down in a notebook. I still write everything by hand. Let me jot this down in a notebook, but don't leave characters, but I'm just not ready for you just yet. So I do have an idea that has sort of caught my soul on fire. And it's also another historical. Do you guys like the historical fiction? Okay. So it's also a historical, and it's another woman who I have discovered that many people don't know about, and I could just see a story. You know, I got to have some love in there. There's no Sadeqa Johnson story without love, but one of the things my agent always jokes is that nobody will ever get a divorce in a Sadeqa Johnson novel. Because I love being married. I love marriage. So there's always going to be some love. And so I'm in the beginning stages of sort of pulling this, like 1948, starts about 1948. That's all I can give you. And I see it right now. This book is the first time I told a story, House of Eve, in 2 characters every other chapter. So I hope you really enjoy that. So I always have to challenge myself and push myself a little further. So now this next book wants to be told in 3 character voices. So wish me luck.
All right, we got time for one last question here, and then we'll have these.
Can we do 2? Because I know they
Oh,
really.
yes, absolutely.
All right, so we'll do 2 more questions.
Hi. This has been wonderful, and I'm here with my book club also. You actually came to one of our book club meetings after Second House. We met at a restaurant and you came.
I remember.
You do? But my question is, where does the title for House of Eve come from?
Oh, that's a good question. The House of Eve, well, I'm talking about maternity homes, so the house. And one of the characters pictures the women in the house as Eve, like Adam and Eve, like the first woman. Mm-hmm. And then you had a question? What did you say? Yes.
I read your book, and then there was me. And that book had a really special meaning for me because I've gone through a really difficult time, and I was like, well, when is there going to be time for me? And I'm just curious, what was going on that made you write that book?
Yes, that's a great question. So, and then there was me as my 3rd novel. And when the title really came from, I have 3 kids, so they were still kind of small. And I felt like as a stay-at-home mom, there was never any time for me. So it was like, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then there was me. And I remember there was a picture of all of us. We used to live in New Jersey, and we had gone to Liberty State Park to see the fireworks. And my husband had taken a picture of us, and we're like a selfie, and we're all squeezed together, and everybody's in the frame, and I'm like pushed out of the frame. And so every time I saw that picture, I think, oh, and then there was me. So that's sort of where the title and the idea came from. And then there was me. I always like to write about addiction. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. And so I talked about bulimia in that book, which I think is not discussed enough in our communities. And so it had to do with bulimia. And I have a thing about like motherhood, and surrogacy is in this book. So no adoption, but surrogacy and infidelity. And there's a friendship. The book is about friendship, secrets, and lies. And so that is definitely a book that a lot of people don't talk about. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Thank you all. Oh, last question. I'm sorry, for real, last question. Go ahead, stand up, my love.
Oh, I think I know this person.
I have a question for you. What was your favorite book to write? Like, I know you wrote 4, but which one was like most enjoyable for you?
My dear darling daughter, I wrote 5 books. What was the most fun for me to write? What was your favorite?
And then there was me. I like that one.
She loves And Then There Was Me. Okay. I think that, so Yellow Wife was really hard, guys. Like, that was a really hard book to write. It was my first time writing historical fiction. And to be quite honest, I didn't think that I could write historical fiction. I thought it was a special talent that you had to have, that you write contemporary fiction and that's what you do. You write about yourself. That's what I did. And so to have to switch my brain and write a book that happened more than 100 years before I was born was really something that was hard for me to wrap my brain around. But I remember just being bitten by the story and just feeling like the ancestors had been waiting for me and they followed me home and they just kept insisting that I write the story. And I told a good girlfriend of mine that I had this book, but I was terrified. And she said, the thing that scares you most is what you're supposed to be doing next. And that's what I've been striving to do. And so I hope that you love The House of Eve as much as I loved writing it. And I hope that the thing that scares you most is what you will do next. Thank you.